May the efforts of this council blend the righteousness of Allah with the all-knowing wisdom of Satan.
God, you're hot. You know that? Hey, where'd you go to school at?
Yeah. Social justice and climate change. It always boils down to those two things, and it gets progressive women 100% of the time.
It does. It does.
It's called the Lone Star tick, where if it bites you, you'll become allergic to meat. I can sort of describe the mechanism. So that's something that we can do through human engineering. We can kind of possibly address really big world problems through human engineering.
Shut the TN program. And then keep them in, or make them pay their $500,000 so that if they leave, I'm okay with that. You want to go to the US? Give me back my money.
Welcome back, everybody. Yeah, we're just going to show a bunch of videos here about the world today, what we're going through. Yeah, like and subscribe if you get anything from this. It definitely helps the channel because the algorithm does not like me. Too many truths. All right, everybody, you really want to screw them over? Stop using their money. Crypto, links down below. Earn more, screw the banks. Yeah, that's the biggest thing you can do to make change in this world. All right, before we get started, I just want to read one thing here. A society in decline is easier to manage than one that's strong, educated, and self-reliant. Strong people ask questions. They notice patterns. They don't just accept what they're told. Yeah, exactly. Don't accept what you're told. Question everything. Thanks for watching, everybody. Enjoy these next few clips and really be part of the change, not the problem. Get your money out of the banks. Screw them over. Don't use their money. Use your money. Research what crypto is. They told you it was bad. They're lying. Crypto is freedom. Let's screw them all.
They're also launching basically the next COVIDs, which is going to come in the form of ticks this time. Ticks that cause a rare, dangerous red meat allergy are spreading. What precautions can you take? That's interesting. Ticks that cause a red meat allergy. I could have sworn I heard that somewhere once. At Davos.
So for example, I have milk intolerance, and some people are intolerant to crayfish. So possibly we can use human engineering to make it the case that we're intolerant to certain kinds of meat, to certain kinds of bovine proteins. And there's actually analogs of this in life. There's this thing called the Lone Star tick, where if it bites you, you'll become allergic to meat. I can sort of describe the mechanism. So that's something that we can do through human engineering. We can kind of possibly address really big world problems through human engineering.
Yeah, and they even had Tucker Carlson, who's controlled opposition, come out and tell you, because that's part of what controlled opposition does. They tell you some of the truth. They put it in your face. Most people won't even listen.
It is the same organism that causes Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and that's the most deadly tick-borne disease in the United States. It also was a germ that was being weaponized by the U.S. military at the time, and they tried to stuff it in ticks. I mean, so what is tick weaponization? So in the interviews with Willie, what he said was, I spent over a decade in the biological weapons program, a contractor to Fort Detrick, working on weaponizing fleas, ticks, and mosquitoes, trying to mass produce them, trying to make new diseases, mixing bacteria and virus in ticks with the intent of, this is the perfect stealth weapon. It's poor man's nuke.
It's hard to digest all of this. It's just so evil. It's hard to believe it could happen in the United States. But I think you're right that it did, and maybe still happening.
What happened around the pandemic is that this whole other segment, what I don't think many of the tech mafia wives realize is that they were used to set the groundwork for what was called like the reset, what is called generally as like the reset by the Klaus Schwabs,
like
of
the
world.
Great Reset.
The Great Reset. Yeah. They openly talk about this Great Reset.
Yeah.
So the tech wife mafias, I believe, were kind of being conscripted in many ways, and their money especially was being conscripted in to set the groundwork for the Great Reset.
Yeah. Specifically through
a network of NGO advisors, relationship with Hollywood, relationship with Davos, and their own companies. So if you look at like who's on these boards, who hangs out with each other, how the culture of tech wealth works, like Silicon Valley tech wealth, and that small group of people responsible for a huge amount of money and a huge amount of NGO activity across the United States. It's a really small group of people, and it's a really small group of people making these decisions.
Yeah.
And then completely blind to everything else that's going on and how their groundwork is being used to then enable these other policies, these great reset policies. Now, what this group of women doesn't realize is that in their haste, these women are all very busy.
Yeah.
They have multiple properties. They have tons of staff. They have staff issues, chronic staff issues. Their kids are busy. Their kids oftentimes have some health issues as well. A lot of them have relationship issues with their husbands. And a lot of them themselves are like medicated on SSRIs and antidepressants and all of that because it's just overwhelming.
Yeah.
So, so it's chaos, and these women find their meaning through their philanthropic work.
Yeah.
And they find themselves, like I would find myself, that was my self-worth, was my philanthropic work, and I really believed in it. I really believed that I was giving Black communities a chance to like rise up out of oppression. I really believed that I was helping Indigenous communities rise up out of oppression. And now that I look back and see how all those grants are performing, you know, because my version of success is those communities are actually uplifted.
Yeah. Not just more money pumped into them.
Not just more money. No, the problems of the community have gotten worse. Crime in the community has gotten worse. Mental health in the Native community, the Indigenous community, has gotten worse. They will even say, the Indigenous community will even say that their biggest supporters in Congress have been Republicans, but yet they continue to vote Democrat.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that is this, it's like, the whole model is broken. The whole model makes everybody worse off. And now we're contending with the frickin' Great Reset that we're now realizing is a terrible idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that many of our climate change issues are geoengineering issues.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is like, at the end of the day, they always go to that. They're like, but climate change. And then...
Yeah, that really is the end all be all. Like, you have to let us do this because of climate change.
Yeah. Social justice and climate change, it always boils down to those two things, and it gets progressive women 100% of the time.
It does. It does. So,
and globally, did we solve that? Like, did we actually manage to vaccinate everyone in the world? No. So highlighting water as a global commons and what it means to work together and see it both out of that kind of global commons perspective, but also the self-interest perspective, because it does have that parallel. It's not only important, but it's also important because we haven't managed to solve those problems which had similar attributes. And water is something that people understand. You know, climate change is a bit abstract. Some people understand it really well. Some understand it a bit. Some just don't understand it. Water, every kid knows how important it is to have water. When you're playing football and you're thirsty, you need water. So there's also something about really getting citizen engagement around this and really, in some ways, experimenting with this notion of the common good. Can we actually deliver this time in ways that we have failed miserably?
So it's day 3 now of big protests happening in Ireland, where you have farmers, lorry drivers, contractors, all out protesting against the fuel costs and the rising costs. And I just want to say fair play to every single one of you out there. And I genuinely feel sorry for anyone who's been complaining and disagreeing and making a mockery out of the whole situation. God love you, you mustn't have two brain cells to put together. You must be living in an absolute fairy tale world. And don't get me started about Micheál Martin giving out and saying how the protesting is wrong and that people aren't making hospital appointments. Is this lad for real? He didn't care about people missing hospital appointments for 2 years when they locked the whole country down during that 2020 nonsense. Every time you fill your car up with diesel or petrol, the government takes 60% of that. 60%. So if they really wanted, they could put a stop to this whole situation right now. And we're expected to keep everything running no matter the cost. And the people who are growing food and keeping this whole country running are the ones that are being squeezed the most. So when is enough enough? Anyways, if I had my own tractor, I'd be up there with you all in the middle of it. So keep it going, lads. Fair play to you.
I don't know why nobody is talking about this, but since I reported that Nancy Pelosi bought shares of Tempest on MLK Day, shares of Tempest are up 117% in just 17 days. Now, what's crazy about this is that she's actually up even more, because if you remember the video, she didn't just buy shares of Tempest. She bought call options, which give her even more leverage. What that means is she isn't just up 117%. Looking at the data, we can see that her original investment of $75,000 is now worth $235,000. A 213% gain since we disclosed it a couple weeks ago. Trades like this are exactly why I tell people that until they outlaw trading in Congress, they should be checking QuiverQuant every day to see exactly what stocks members of Congress are buying and selling. Because at the end of the day, they have access to information that the public doesn't, which gives them a huge edge in the market. Good luck, and until next time.
You know, if you're not going to pay us enough to live or afford to live, at least pay us enough not to do this. All you had to do was pay us enough to live. All you had to do was pay us enough to... There goes your inventory.
This is video uploaded by Shamal Abdulkareem, a 29-year-old resident of Ontario, California, burning down the Kimberly-Clark inventory, which cost $500 million in damage and lost inventory, and at least a couple $100 million more to rebuild it back up. And I find this story extraordinarily fascinating for a number of reasons. One, the point he's making, all you had to do was pay us enough to live. So I looked up what Kimberly-Clark pays its warehouse workers. It's about $23, $24 an hour, about $46,000, $47,000 a year. And then I compared that to what it costs to live in Ontario, California. And for one person, it costs about $67,000 a year to live, just to basically get by. So Kimberly-Clark is paying its employees $20,000 less per year and expects them to get by on that salary. And then I thought, well, hold on, are they making enough money? And I looked up their financial statements, and on $20 billion revenue, they're making about $2.55 billion in profit, in net profit, every single year. So I divided that by the number of employees that Kimberly-Clark has, which is about 38,000, and I thought, okay, if they were to pay their employees an extra $20,000 a year, get them to a place where they could afford to work where they live, get them to $67,000 a year, what would that cost? Well, it would cost them about $750 million. They would still have nearly $2 billion in profits every single year and have every employee get enough money to live where they work. Right now in the United States, 60% of Americans are not being paid enough just to get by. And there's this mythology that, well, just work harder, Americans are lazy. And this is trash. This is nonsense. They want us to think that billionaires need more tax cuts, otherwise they're not gonna work. And for young people or low-income people or poor people, giving them more money is gonna make them lazy. It is absolute nonsense. The trickle-down scam is nonsense. Billion-dollar corporations are paying the lowest tax rate of any modern era. Billionaires are paying a lower tax rate than any demographic in America. I'm not endorsing what Shamal Abdulkareem did. I am saying that what his anger and frustration is grounded in reality. Corporations are making billions in profits and not paying their own workers the basic standard they need to live. That is a fact, and denying that will continue to cost corporations even more money as people lash out to the injustice, the economic violence being imposed upon them.
And on the other side of it, let me give a bit of a sober on the protect side. So let me give you a few facts. In Canada, the minute you have your degree, if it's a professional degree, right? There's something in the Canada kind of free trade agreement. I got the wrong acronym, but you get it. It's called the TN program. So Microsoft, I finished from University of Waterloo with my computer degree. Microsoft phones me, offers me a job, 300 grand a year, right? All I have to do is show up at the border, apply for a TN visa, right? And I get this 3-year, like no questions asked, it costs $30. And now I moved to Microsoft. We as Canadians have subsidized my education to the tune of, you pick the number, $500,000, right? 500,000, and if it's a graduate student, go up, right? 30,000 TN go to the US every year. You want to save yourself $5 to $10 billion? Shut the TN program. And then keep them in, or make them pay their $500,000 so that if they leave, I'm okay with that. You want to go to the US? Give me back my money. Like my dad, my mom, you all work every day to offer them their education. So we need both sides. We need to fight on one side to make sure that we bring the very best talent of the world because they all want to come here now. It's absolutely wonderful. But you can't have the sieve on the other side. You can't let $5 billion or $10 billion a year of your hard-earned cash so that Microsoft can get smarter.
Please rise for the invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Vice Mayor Scott Maxwell.
Duly noted. Our collective atheism, which is to say loving empathy, scientific evidence, and critical thinking, leads us to believe that we can create a better, more equal community without religious divisions. May we pray together. Mother Earth, we gather today in your redeeming and glorious presence to invoke your eternal guidance in the universe, the original creator of all things. May the efforts of this council blend the righteousness of Allah with the all-knowing wisdom of Satan. May Zeus, the great god of justice, grant us strength tonight. Jesus might forgive our shortcomings, while Buddha enlightens us through his divine affection. We praise you, Krishna, for the sanguine sacrifice that freed us all. After all, if Almighty Thor is with us, who can ever be against us? And finally, for the bounty of logic, reason, and science, we simply thank the atheists, agnostics, humanists, who now account for 1 in 5 Americans, and growing rapidly. In closing, let us, above all, love one another, not to obtain mythical rewards for ourselves now, hereafter, or based on superstitious threats of eternal damnation, but rather embrace secular-based principles of morality and do good for goodness sake. And so we prayed, so what? Thank you, Council.
God, you're hot. You know that? Dang. Where'd you go to school at?
I go Crockett.
All right.
Well, I'm asking a question. You don't have to answer, but let's just say if you were really offended by that, just raise your hand. If it doesn't offend you, keep your hand down. Do you see what I'm saying here, guys? How would you like your kid talked to like that? We have to worry about our kids getting shot up in schools and all this other stuff, right? But what we don't need to be worrying about is the comments of a man to a minor.
Good dad.
Would you want that kid? Would you want your kid around that guy without a camera around? I wouldn't. And I'm astonished by every single person here. I'm going to tell you straight up, if this guy still has a job here soon, I'm going to do whatever I can to raise as much money as I can to get every single one of y'all out of here. No joke. And the rest of the team is with me. We're going to be down here every school meeting and everything. That's unacceptable, man. And look at your face. You don't even care. This is your community that you're supposed to be serving. Look at the distraction. You put us on the map nationally, embarrassed us. And you don't even have the backbone just to walk off, dude.